Closing arguments begin today in the murder trial of Lori Vallow Daybell, following more than 60 witnesses and 6 weeks of testimony. Now, the Idaho woman is accused of killing her 2 youngest children. She is also charged with conspiracy to commit murder in their deaths and in the deaths of her husband's first wife. She's pleaded not guilty to all counts. Joining us now is CBS News correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti. Jonathan, prosecutors have called on dozens of witnesses, which is really stunning. Talk to us about what the central argument is that the prosecution is making and how the witness testimony backed it up.
Yeah, it is stunning, Errol, and good afternoon to you. From the very beginning, prosecutors have argued these murders were fueled by what they described as power, sex, and money. And over 5 weeks, as you described, dozens of witnesses took the stand to all, in one form or another, really bolster that argument. We're talking everyone from family and friends to law enforcement. At one point, we heard from a detective at the Rexburg, Idaho Police Department who was specifically in charge of looking into a life insurance policy that was paid out after Chad Daybell's then-wife, Tammy Daybell, suddenly died. According to that testimony, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell then used some of that money to fund their Hawaiian wedding only a few weeks later after her passing. We also heard from very close family and friends. Specifically with family, we're talking about Lori Vallow's sister and one of her surviving sons, who in very emotional recordings, phone calls that were recorded, straight out accused in so many words Lori Vallow of killing her children. At one point, you hear Lori laughing on that recording, almost trying to just brush the whole thing off. And then to the friends, and this is really critical because we heard from several friends who were directly involved in Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell's inner circle and really tried to outline the power dynamic between the two, describing that both of these people believed they were put on this earth, on this planet, to lead the world through the end of times. They described, as twisted as this sounds, a scale of good and bad, light and dark. And according to several testimonies that we heard from witnesses, Lori Vallow oftentimes referred to her 2 children, Tylee Ryan and JJ, as having dark spirits and being zombies. So very critical and compelling testimony. This is being brought up right now as part of the closing arguments from the prosecution. We're now getting ready to hear what the defense has to say in those arguments.
Yeah, just hearing that testimony gives you chills. On the flip side of this, though, you mentioned the defense. They've not called any witnesses, and Lori Vallow Daybell herself has declined to testify. Why may that be?
Yeah, and to give you some context here, so Lori Vallow faced the death sentence if she was found guilty, but her attorney successfully argued to have that removed from the table before the trial even began. So in one sense, a major hurdle here was already cleared before the jury even sat down to hear this case. The defense in their opening arguments tried to point out that Lori Vallow wasn't in Idaho at the time of these murders, but I think the prosecution was very compelling in their counter argument, saying and describing Lori Vallow as what they said was a quote-unquote master puppeteer that was always pulling the strings of everything that took place. As to why the defense did not call any of their own witnesses, that at this point is unclear. We could assume, though, that perhaps he would have called family and friends, perhaps the same family and friends that already took the stand. And as we've already discussed, a lot of their testimony was very damning to Lori Vallow.
And you mentioned Lori being characterized as the puppet master of this entire thing. We should note that her husband, Chad Daybell, he is being tried separately on murder and conspiracy charges in these 3 deaths. When will his trial begin, and how might it differ from his wife's?
Well, there's a lot of striking similarities. I think there's, in some cases, some more damning evidence that we've already gotten a preview of during this trial with Lori Vallow. I'm specifically talking about a text exchange that Chad Daybell sent to his then living wife, Tammy Daybell. He was in his backyard describing shooting a raccoon and then burying it and burning it in the pet cemetery. Investigators have already said this aligns with around the same time they believe that Tylee Ryan was buried in that backyard. And as we know, as gruesome as all of this is, her remains were found and they were charred. So there is a lot of evidence, and we of course can't forget that both of the children were found in his backyard. As for when this trial will begin, at this point we don't have a clear sense. We're hearing it could be sometime in early 2024, Errol.
All right, difficult to hear. I know this is also very difficult to cover. Jonathan Vigliotti, thank you very much.
Thank you.